Please, Miss Everdeen, says the man. He gestures down the hallway. It's weird to be ushered around your own home, but I know better than to comment on it. As I go, I give my mother a reassuring smile over my shoulder. Probably more instructions for the tour. They've been sending me all kinds of stuff about my itinerary and what protocol will be observed in each district. But as I walk toward the door of the study, a door I've never even seen closed until this moment, I can feel my mind begin to race. Who's here? What do they want? Why is my mother so pale? Go right in, says the Capitol man, who has followed me down the hallway. I twist the polished brass knob and step inside. My nose registers the conflicting scents of roses and blood. A small, white-haired man who seems vaguely familiar is reading a book. He holds up a finger, as if to say, "Give me a moment." And then he turns, and my heart skips a beat. I'm staring into the snake-like eyes of President Snow. In my mind, President Snow should be viewed in front of marble pillars hung with oversized flags. It's jarring to see him surrounded by the ordinary objects in the room. Like taking the lid off a pot and finding a fanged viper instead of stew. What could he be doing here? My mind rushes back to the opening days of other victory tours. I remember seeing the winning tributes with their mentors and stylists. Even some high government officials have made appearances occasionally, but I've never seen President Snow. He attends celebrations in the Capitol. Period. If he's made the journey all the way from the city, it can only mean one thing. I am in serious trouble. And if I am, so is my family. A shiver goes through me when I think of the proximity of my mother and sister to this man who despises me, will always despise me, because I outsmarted his sadistic Hunger Games, made the Capitol look foolish, and consequently undermined his control. All I was doing was trying to keep PETA and myself alive. Any act of rebellion was purely coincidental. But when the Capitol decrees that only one tribute can live, and you have the audacity to challenge it, I guess that's rebellion in itself. My only defense was pretending that I was driven insane by a passionate love for PETA. So we were both allowed to live, to be crowned victors, to go home and celebrate and wave goodbye to the cameras and be left alone. Until now. Perhaps it's the newness of the house, or the shock of seeing him, or the mutual understanding that he could have killed me in a second, that makes me feel like the intruder. As if this is his home, and I'm the uninvited party. So I don't welcome him, or offer him a chair. I don't say anything. In fact, I treat him as if he's a real snake, the venomous kind. I stand motionless, my eyes locked on him, considering plans of retreat. I think we'll make this whole situation a lot simpler by agreeing not to lie to each other, he says. What do you think? I think my tongue has frozen and speech will be impossible. So I surprise myself by answering back in a steady voice. Yes, I think that would save time. President Snow smiles, and I notice his lips for the first time. I'm expecting snake lips, which is to say none, but his are overly full, the skin stretched too tight. I have to wonder if his mouth has been altered to make him more appealing. If so, it was a waste of time and money, because he's not appealing at all. My advisors were concerned you would be difficult. But you're not planning on being difficult, are you? He asks. No, I answer. That's what I told them. I said any girl who goes to such lengths to preserve her life isn't going to be interested in throwing it away with both hands. And then there's her family to think of. Her mother, her sister, and all those cousins. By the way he lingers on the word cousins, I can tell he knows that Gail and I don't share a family tree. Well, it's all on the table now. Maybe that's better. I don't do well with ambiguous threats. I'd much rather know the score. Let's sit. President Snow takes a seat at the large desk of polished wood where Prim does her homework and my mother her budgets. Like our home, this is a place that he has no right, but ultimately every right, to occupy. I sit in front of the desk on one of the carved, straight-back chairs. It's made for someone taller than I am, so only my toes rest on the ground. I have a problem, Miss Everdeen, says President Snow. A problem that began the moment you pulled out those poisonous berries in the arena. That was the moment when I guessed that if the game makers had to choose between watching Peeta and me commit suicide, which would mean having no victor, and letting us both live, they would take the latter. If the head game maker, Seneca Crane, had any brains, he'd have blown you to dust right then. But he has an unfortunate sentimental streak, so here you are. Can you guess where he is? He asks. I nod, because by the way he says it, it's clear that Seneca Crane has been executed. The smell of roses and blood has grown stronger now, that only a desk separates us. There's a rose in President Snow's lapel, which at least suggests the source of the flower perfume, but it must be genetically enhanced, because no real rose reeks like that. As for the blood, I don't know. After that, there was nothing to do but let you play out your little scenario. And you were pretty good, too, with the love-crazed schoolgirl bit. The people in the capital were quite convinced. Unfortunately, not everyone in the districts fell for your act, he says. My face must register at least a flicker of bewilderment, because he addresses it. This, of course, you don't know. You have no access to information about the mood in other districts. In several of them, however, people viewed your little trick with the berries as an act of defiance, not an act of love. And if a girl from District 12, of all places, can defy the capital and walk away unharmed, what is to stop them from doing the same, he says. What is to prevent, say, an uprising? It takes a moment for his last sentence to sink in. Then the full weight of it hits me. There have been uprisings? I ask, both chilled and somewhat elated by the possibility. Not yet, but they'll follow if the course of things doesn't change. And uprisings have been known to lead to revolution. President Snow rubs a spot over his left eyebrow, the very spot where I myself get headaches. Do you have any idea what that would mean? How many people would die? What conditions those left would have to face? Whatever problems anyone may have with the capital, believe me when I say that if it released its grip on the districts for even a short time, the entire system would collapse. I'm taken aback by the directness and even the sincerity of his speech. And if his primary concern is the welfare of the citizens of Panem, when nothing can be further from the truth, I don't know how I dare say the next words, but I do. It must be very fragile if a handful of berries can bring it down. There is a long pause while he examines me. Then he simply says, "It is fragile, but not in the way that you suppose." There's a knock at the door, and the capital man sticks his head in. Her mother wants to know if you want tea. I would like tea, says the president. The door opens wider, and there stands my mother, holding a tray with a china tea set that she brought to the seam when she married. Set it here, please. He places his book on the corner of the desk and pats the center. My mother sets the tray on the desk. It holds china teapot and cups, cream and sugar, and a plate of cookies. They are beautifully iced with softly colored flowers. The frosting work can only be Peta's. What a welcome sight! You know, it's funny how people often forget that presidents need to eat too, President Snow says charmingly. Well, it seems to relax my mother a bit anyway. Can I get you anything else? I can cook something more substantial if you're hungry, she offers. Oh no, this could not be more perfect, thank you, he says, clearly dismissing her. My mother nods, shoots me a glance, and goes. President Snow pours tea for both of us and fills his with cream and sugar, and then takes a long time stirring. I sense he has had his say and is waiting for me to respond. I didn't mean to start any uprisings, I tell him.